This channel is run solely by a disabled person who is just learning how to video edit. There will be mistakes. Hopefully, as I get better at video editing, those mistakes will get fewer and fewer. That's the plan anyway. Also, I have a speech impairment. I am well aware of what I sound like. I have taken the extra time to create subtitles manually. This means I typed every word in the subtitles. I tried my hardest to be accurate, but again, I'm sure there will be mistakes. I would love to use AI like every other creator, but it will not work with my speech. This means I will probably be slower at content creation. My plan is 1 video per week. Finally, this channel is going to have a lot of true crime content. Viewer discretion is advised.
When paramedics found 9-year-old Davontae Williams in his Texas apartment, he weighed just over 35 pounds. A child starved not only of food, but of love, safety, and a system that should have protected him. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to talk about the case of Davontae Williams, a child with a developmental disability who was abused and starved by his mother and her partner. I don't have too much to add, so let's jump right into the case. I'm going to make myself small so we can see the disability memorial candle in the background. There. A systemic failure. The tragic death of Davontae Marcel Williams. Introduction. I still remember the first time I heard about Davontae Williams, a 9-year-old boy whose life ended far too soon in 2004. His name appeared on the list of children who died after contact with Child Protection Services. Something about him made me pause. After 25 years of being a disability advocate, I learned how often the most vulnerable are overlooked, how a system meant to protect can fail, and how society can quickly decide that some lives are too complicated to save. On July 26, 2004, Davontae's mother, Marcella Williams, called 911. She said her son wasn't breathing. When paramedics arrived, they found him for several hours. He weighed only 35 pounds, about what a healthy 3-year-old should weigh. His body was covered in more than 250 scars and injuries, ligature marks on his wrists and ankles, and new wounds layered over old wounds. The medical examiner ruled his death occurred by malnutrition, with pneumonia being a contributing factor. But what truly killed was a slow erosion of care, a collapse of empathy, and a system that ignored the warning signs until it was too late. A system that looked away. Between 1999 and 2004, Texas Child Protective Services (CPS) investigated Davontae's home 6 times. Each visit came after reports of abuse and neglect. His small frame, missed school days, lack of medical care. Once he and his sister were removed from the home after allegations against his mother's partner, Lisa Ann Coleman. But within a year, the children were returned to the home. That's a pattern we've seen too many times. Caseworkers overloaded with files, supervisors pressured to close cases, and a system more concerned with compliance than connection. Each report treated as a separate incident, not as a part of a growing pan of danger. The truth is, bureaucracy can't love a child. It can't sit with fear or recognize the silence of a child too scared to speak. The Pantry Prison. During the trial, it came out that Davontae was often locked in the pantry, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, as a punishment. He was fed inconsistently and did not contact with the rest of the household. His world became smaller and darker until the pantry became his prison. That image haunts me. To lock a child away is to deny their humanity. When prosecutors charged Marcella Williams and Lisa Coleman with capital murder, they argued that confinement itself amounted to kidnapping, an aggravating factor under Texas law. Williams accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to life in prison. Coleman went to trial, was convicted, and was sentenced to death. On September 17, 2014, Lisa Ann Coleman was executed. A death that shocked Arlington. When police responded to the 911 call that day, they arrived at a scene that would have most seasoned investigators. Davontae's mother, Marcella Williams, told dispatchers her son had stopped breathing. By the time paramedics arrived, rigor mortis had already set in, meaning that Davontae had been dead for hours. At the time of his he weighed just 35 pounds, less than half the average for a 9-year-old boy. His body bore over 250 scars, clear signs of prolonged abuse. There were infected wounds on his wrist and legs, consistent with being bound by plastic cords. The medical examiners later testified that his heart was nearly devoid of fat. There was food in the home, but none had been given to Davontae. The official cause of death was malnutrition, with pneumonia being a contributing factor. This case, like too many before it, forced Texas authorities and the public to confront a devastating question. How could a child known to Child Protective Services die in such a horrific way? A troubled home. Marcella Williams and her partner Lisa Ann Coleman were arrested and charged with capital murder. Investigators determined that both women, without food, isolated Davontae and tied him up for long periods. Prosecutors described Coleman's role as dominant and violent. Williams eventually pleaded guilty, receiving a life sentence in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Coleman, on the other hand, went to trial and was sentenced to. She was executed in 2014, 10 years after Davontae's. Coleman's background revealed a cycle of abuse and trauma. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and moved through multiple foster homes as a child. A child expert described her life as marked by trauma from the start. But while her past was tragic, prosecutors argued that it couldn't justify what was done to Davontae. They said the starvation, the beatings, the confinement, all of it was deliberate and prolonged. A child known to the system. Davontae's story could have ended differently if the system that was built to protect him had worked. He was on Child Protective Services radar almost from birth. Case files show that investigations started when he was just 2 months old for suspected abuse. By 1999, both Davontae and his sister were removed from the home for signs of physical abuse. At that time, case workers documented bruises, swelling, and hair loss. They concluded that Lisa Coleman had abused him. A year later, Marcella Williams regained custody on the condition she stay away from Coleman. That promise was broken almost immediately. By 2002, new reports of abuse surfaced. Davontae had stopped attending school. CPS tried to visit the home 9 times in 7 weeks, but no one ever answered the door. Eventually, the family disappeared. A CPS spokesman later admitted the family was on our radar for years. We lost track of them in 2002. That admission became part of a larger reckoning for Texas CPS, which faced mounting criticism for its repeated failures. In the aftermath of Davontae's death, lawmakers approved reforms, including $200 million to hire and train new caseworkers. But for Davontae, reforms came too late. The trial and legal questions. Lisa Coleman's trial began in 2006. Prosecutors argued that the abuse and starvation met the criteria for capital murder, arguing that Davontae had effectively been kidnapped in his own home. The defense countered that he couldn't have been kidnapped because he hadn't been taken from his home, and that Coleman's race, sex, and traumatic past had unfairly shaped the case against her. Medical testimony was brutal. The county medical examiner told juries that Davontae's body had begun consuming its tissue for lack of nutrition. His wound couldn't heal, he said, because there was nothing left to repair them. After 1 hour of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Coleman was sentenced to. On appeal, her attorneys argued that the kidnapping charge had been misapplied, but the courts upheld the conviction. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene, and Coleman was executed on September 17, 2014. The human behind the case file. When you read through the public records, what stands out the most is not just the cruelty, but the silence about who Davontae Williams really was. We know he was 10 years old. We know he had a developmental disability. We know he was starved, beaten, and isolated. But we don't know his favorite color. We don't know what TV shows made him laugh. We don't know if he loved cartoons, superheroes, or playing outside. None of that is preserved in any files. The documents describe his injuries and cause of death, but not his laughter, not his personality, not the things that made him him. The silence is his own tragedy. It shows how easily people with disabilities, especially children, are reduced to case numbers, diagnoses, and headlines, rather than remembered as full human beings. The fact that we don't know what made Davontae happy is one of the clearest signs that society failed him long before his death. A broader pattern. Sadly, Davontae's story isn't unique. Across the United States, disabled children and adults die every year at the hands of caregivers who are supposed to love them. These crimes rarely get the same attention as other murders, especially when the perpetrators are family members who say they were overwhelmed. Disability advocates call this what it is: systemic ableism. The quiet belief that disabled lives are less valuable and that their deaths are somehow more understandable. Even when there are convictions, the underlying attitudes are still there. It's embedded in how cases are covered, how sentences are handed down, and how the victims are remembered or forgotten. Remembering Davontae. In the end, we would never know what made Davontae smile, what dreams he had, or what person he would have grown into. But we can say his name. We can tell his story. Can remember that he existed, not just as a victim, but as a child who deserves love, protection, and a future. His story is more than a tragedy. It's a warning. It's a call to remember every child, disabled or not, deserves to be seen, heard, and safe. Well, that's it for Davontae's case. I brought this case to your attention because I think we need to remember these victims. There are so many true crime channels. I'm a true crime addict. I watch hours and hours of true crime content. But I noticed that for some egregious cases involving people with disabilities don't get covered. And that's what I would like to do on the channel. Give voice to disabled victims. I hope I covered this case thoroughly and did a good job of remembering him. If you want to help me remember these victims, please comment below. Your comment do a lot to help the channel grow. Well, that's it for today. If you like this content, you know what to do. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.